Hello everyone, good to see you again for more HOA tales. I was away on a business trip for just 3 days, and that was all the time my neighbor needed to ruin a tree valued at $50,000 along with my children's treehouse. He insisted the HOA had authorized it, but they hadn't. And the events that followed will astonish you. Let's jump straight into this homeowner association narrative. So, I reside in a peaceful community that is governed by an HOA. For the most part, it isn't awful. They issue the standard irritating notices regarding garbage cans and exterior paint shades, but they let you be if you settle your fees and keep your home presentable. I have never really faced any issues with them. In my backyard, there stood a massive oak tree. It was the sort of specimen you rarely see nowadays. It had a white canopy, a stout trunk, and offered ideal shade during the summer. When I purchased the property, that tree was a major factor that convinced me to buy the house. It was stunning. A couple of years back, I was having some landscaping done, and a buddy inquired if I had ever gotten the tree appraised. When I replied that I hadn't, he detailed why it was crucial. A tree of that age and size could be worth a fortune, and if it were harmed without being insured or valued, I wouldn't be able to claim anything for damages. I followed his advice and hired an arborist to evaluate it. He informed me the tree was worth in excess of 50 grand. I wasn't even aware trees could receive appraisals, but evidently, healthy old oaks are significant. I retained the documentation simply because it seemed prudent. That turned out to be the wisest move I ever made. Afterward, I constructed a modest treehouse for my kids. It wasn't anything elaborate that belonged on treehouse masters or anything, just some planks, railings, and a small ladder. I even ensured it adhered to HOA regulations. I submitted the paperwork, received written consent, and everything was in order. The HOA board at that time stated it was sturdily constructed. Things remained peaceful for years, but then one day, a new resident on the block began asserting himself. He lived 2 doors down and joined the HOA board as if he were campaigning for a government role. He was the type of individual who believed he was more important than he truly was. He always had a remark about other people's lawns, fences, or automobiles. He also appeared to be wealthy. He had a pricey vehicle, a fancy-looking watch, and was making numerous costly upgrades to his home. That sort of thing. He rarely spoke to me directly, aside from the occasional remark about my tree dropping leaves on his side. I ignored it because leaves are just leaves and they tend to fall everywhere, particularly when it is windy. So, I didn't give it much thought. It turns out I should have. A few months later, I had to travel out of town for my job. It was nothing major, just a few days away. Before departing, I performed my standard checks. I secured the shed, double-checked the gate, and ensured the house and yard were in order. The forecast called for pleasant weather that week, so I didn't worry about anything. I took my kids to my mom's place. I'm a single dad, and when I returned, I walked into the backyard and froze in place. The tree was vanished. Not pruned, not damaged, but gone. Nothing remained except a flat white stump and a mound of sawdust. The treehouse was a splintered disaster in the grass, as if someone had taken a wrecking ball to it. For several seconds, I genuinely could not comprehend it. I wondered if a storm had knocked it down while I was away, but there hadn't been one. Then I observed the tire tracks, large ones, and a massive amount of sawdust that clearly came from the stump being ground down. This was no accident. It was a professional operation. Someone had paid to have my tree removed. And with a tree that large, whoever did it had plenty of spare cash lying around. Shortly after, I spotted my neighbor in his yard. He shouted something about how the HOA finally handled that hazard. I didn't even reply. I just stood there glaring at him, realizing what he had done. I contacted the HOA helpline immediately after that. And the woman on the line sounded perplexed and stated that no work orders or removal permits had been issued for my property. She even verified it twice. So, it wasn't them, at least not directly. That meant it simply had to be him. I ended the call and went back outside. He had already retreated indoors by then, likely assuming I couldn't do anything about it. And honestly, at that instant, I didn't know what I could do. I just stood there gazing at the vacant space where that big old tree used to stand, attempting to grasp the fact that someone believed they had the right to just take it down. The only positive aspect at that moment was that I hadn't collected my kids yet. They weren't super young anymore at 10 and 12, but they still utilized the treehouse as a hangout spot. I knew breaking the news to them was going to upset them as well. The following morning, I lodged a formal complaint with the HOA. I submitted photos of the sawdust pile where the stump was, a picture of a root you could still faintly see, the tire marks, and the wreckage of the treehouse. I even attached the old approval letter demonstrating the treehouse had been permitted years ago. I assumed once they reviewed everything, they would handle it seriously, yet it took them 3 days to get back to me. When they finally replied, they stated they had reviewed the scenario and spoken with the other homeowner. According to them, he claimed the tree was a safety risk and that he had been acting in the community's best interest. That was all. No genuine apology, no strategy to rectify it. They said they would fine him a few hundred for performing unapproved work. That was the specific phrasing they used, unapproved of work. As if cutting down a $50,000 tree was merely a minor clerical error. I called them immediately and stated that wasn't even close to being sufficient. They informed me it was a civil issue between neighbors and that they had done all they could. So, to summarize, my tree was gone, my kid's treehouse was demolished, and the guy responsible received what was essentially a parking fine. I went over to speak with him again, hoping perhaps he would confess to what he did, or at least display some form of regret, but no luck. He insisted that the HOA had granted him permission, which was a falsehood, and he knew it. Before I could even reveal to him how I knew it was a dirty lie, he began ranting again. He claimed the treehouse violated bylaws and the tree was dropping leaves on his side. I had to walk away before I said or did something I would regret or that could be used against me in a courtroom. That evening, I retrieved the old appraisal paperwork from the arborist, the one demonstrating the tree's value, and I had a hunch I would be needing it. I wasn't about to just let this slide. That tree wasn't merely decoration. It was part of the property's worth, and I had evidence of it. So the next day, I contacted the same arborist who had performed the original valuation years back. He still possessed the records of his inspection, which really helped. I explained what occurred, and he visited later that week. He examined where the stump was ground up, the yard, and the remnants of the treehouse, and you could see he was struggling not to look astounded. He noted that whoever removed it had done a clean, professional job, and an expensive one at that. He provided me with an updated written report confirming the tree had been worth around $50,000, perhaps more considering its size and health. He also included a note that the tree displayed no indications of disease or damage, meaning there was no justification for it to be cut down. Based on what he could observe of the stump and remaining root system, combined with photos I had of my kids in the treehouse and his prior appraisal, he was able to state with confidence that the tree was healthy. I was still amazed that there were individuals out there who knew so much about trees and their worth. That report was going to be solid gold. Next, I began tracking down the crew that had performed the labor. I spoke to a few local tree service companies until I located the right one. The man on the phone was reluctant at first. But once I explained what happened, he admitted straight up that the neighbor had hired them. He was provided paperwork with HOA authorization to remove the tree. That is when I knew I possessed everything I needed. Honestly, it is likely way more than I required. I consulted a lawyer who informed me this was a definitive case of property destruction. He recommended I sue for the appraised value plus damages, and I consented immediately. We filed the lawsuit shortly after. The neighbor was served a few days later. He attempted to act nonchalant about it, walking around like nothing had occurred, but I could tell he was shaken. I didn't say a word to him. I didn't need to. He knew precisely what he had done, and now he was finally going to have to face it. When the court date finally arrived, I will admit I was anxious. I never sued anyone before, and I am not the type of person who enjoys drama or conflict, but there was no way I was going to let this guy escape consequences. He arrived dressed as if he thought he was about to deliver a business presentation. All confidence, no apology. The moment I saw that arrogant look, I knew I had made the right decision filing the lawsuit. His attorney began by stating the tree was a threat to nearby properties and that my treehouse was not compliant with HOA safety standards, basically the same nonsense he had been spouting since day one. Then my lawyer stood up and began laying everything out in sequence. The old HOA approval letter for the treehouse, the original arborist report, the new appraisal confirming the value and the photos I had taken, and finally the written statement from the tree service owner stating he had been told it was an HOA removal order and his copy of the HOA paperwork. The arborist also testified. He stated plainly that the tree was healthy and posed no danger to anyone. The judge asked a few questions regarding the appraisal process and then looked directly at the neighbor and asked if he had any documentation from the HOA to him, stating that he could get the tree cut down, but he didn't. His lawyer attempted to shift the blame, claiming it was a misunderstanding and done in good faith, but that didn't work either. You cannot accidentally spend thousands of dollars removing someone else's tree, plus the fact that he had utilized the HOA letterhead to pretend that something was approved when it actually wasn't. That just dug him in deeper. It was so clearly premeditated, and in the end, the judge ruled entirely in my favor. My neighbor was ordered to pay the full appraised value of the tree, $50,000, plus additional damages for the destruction of the treehouse and legal fees. My lawyer did mention at the start that the paperwork could be considered fraud, but since this was just a civil case, he wouldn't face criminal trouble for that here. When the judge read the verdict, my neighbor didn't say a word, just stared straight ahead like he was still trying to process that he had actually lost. I walked out of there feeling lighter than I had in months. News spread through the neighborhood faster than I anticipated. I didn't tell anyone about the lawsuit, but people talk, and HOA communities love gossip. Within a week, everyone knew that the self-appointed HOA enforcer who cut down my tree had lost significantly in court. I started noticing the change immediately. He was not strutting around the neighborhood anymore or barking at people about trash cans or mailboxes. His confidence vanished overnight. He would still attend the HOA meetings, but he sat in the back, silent, while everyone else avoided eye contact with him. He was removed from the board for obvious reasons, and eventually, someone told me he had been struggling financially to pay the judgment to me. I didn't feel bad about it, though. I mean, it was a problem that he created for himself. If he wanted to attempt to get sympathy from me or anybody else, it was not going to happen. The best part was how the HOA reacted afterward, though. Suddenly, they were very interested in ensuring all board decisions were properly documented. They sent out an email regarding transparency improvements and individual liability. And I think my case scared them straight. The neighbor ceased maintaining his yard after that, and you could tell he was finished with the place. The grass began getting high, and the half-finished backyard projects just sat there. It remained that way for several months before "for sale" sign went up. I didn't celebrate or anything. I just recall walking by one morning and seeing the moving truck out front. He was out there loading boxes, avoiding everyone's gaze. I did not say a word. After all that noise and arrogance, the silence was pleasant. After he moved out, things finally returned to normal. The new people who bought his place were friendly and minded their own business. The neighborhood felt peaceful again. A few months later, I utilized part of the settlement money to plant a new tree in the same spot. It is smaller, obviously, but healthy and growing fast. I even rebuilt a smaller version of the old treehouse. Not the same, of course, but it is something. The HOA has been quiet since then. They learned their lesson about overstepping boundaries and now ensure every approval and rule is written down. Nobody has tried to tell me what I can or cannot do with my own yard ever again. I still miss that big oak, but I care for the new one and hope it will have just as long of a life as the other one. Maybe in a few hundred years, somebody else will build a treehouse for their kids in it. Sometimes you don't need to yell or cause a scene to get justice. You just have to stand your ground, remain patient, and let the truth do the heavy lifting. And yeah, guys, if you enjoy the HOA stories, please don't forget to like the video. And the next one is another crazy neighbor story that is titled, "Scumbag Neighbor Broke Into My Vehicle and Stole My Stuff." So, I returned a favor. So, I rented a duplex in my early 20s. And my neighbor was a wannabe gangster type who made the mistake of breaking into my vehicle one night. I had a small SUV with a removable soft top, so the neighbor figured it would be easy pickings to just peel back the top and help himself to my stereo amplifier, CDS, and some other miscellaneous items. I discovered the break-in early in the morning after it occurred. I knew for certain who the culprit was. We were not in a heavily populated area, and my neighbor was well known for thievery. I waited around for him to leave his place, and when the opportunity arose, I went around the back of the house and looked through the bedroom window to find that, sure enough, my stuff was sitting right on the floor in there. I instinctively tried the window, and as luck would have it, the sash went right up. Bingo! I hopped through and quickly surveyed the items lying around. It occurred to me that I could get some excellent revenge here if I played it right. So rather than just recoup my stuff and wind up in a fight over it, I borrowed a marker and proceeded to write my name on all my stuff and also a few choice items of his just for good measure. I then climbed back out the window and waited. When he finally came back, I called for some police presence and explained to them how my vehicle got robbed, and I knew it was the neighbor due to seeing through the window. We then knocked on his door, and I can still remember the look on his face seeing me and the cops standing there. He was not even close to ready for the encounter and almost certainly had drugs on him, so he was very cooperative given the circumstances. I politely explained that I knew he broke into my vehicle and I needed him to return my stuff immediately or I would have to press charges. He went and retrieved my things, and I pointed out my name written on them to the officer. I asked about my other stuff while he looked back puzzled and dumbfounded. I rattled off the other couple of choice items of his that I also put my name on earlier. And the look on his face while he handed over his own stuff to me while the cop was standing there was just priceless. The next one is a malicious compliance family story. For context, my brother is an inconsiderate douche canoe. It was a free day for me. I had a job with random scheduling, so it was either a weekday or a weekend. I was chilling at home about to cook up something for dinner or late lunch when I got a phone call. 4:30 p.m. My brother called me and expected me to jump up and go pick him up from his job because none of the family were available on a busy weekend for them. When I say he expected, I mean he called me up and said the exact words, "You have to pick me up." This was before he had his own car and license around 18. His job was on the other side of town, a full 30 to 40 minute drive or more depending on traffic, and it was at 4:30 p.m. just before hectic work traffic at 5 p.m. If I had refused to get him, he would have called either of our parents and whined until he complained to me to go pick him up. Understanding the box I'd been put in, a Grinch-like smile grew across my face as I made up my mind. What did I do? I picked him up and then made 3 stops along the way home. 3 long stops. The first was at a gas station. I'd been low on gas and he couldn't complain because I was his only ride. At the second stop, I pulled in at a restaurant to eat inside Tijuana Flats. The whole time he was complaining that I should take it to go and that we were only 15 minutes from home. The whole time he was whining about me wasting time and that he had to do homework. That homework took like 10 minutes, and he just passed out with his TV and Xbox on. Eventually, he even called Grandma to complain. So much so that she called me to ask if I'd offered to buy him any food while there. I did and then told him tough. He wanted the ride. He got it. And finally, at stop 3, a supermarket for miles from home, I needed a few groceries. Around 6:15 p.m. to 6:20 p.m., when we finally got home, he complained like a little witch to our parents, Grandma, and Dad. But when my dad got home from work, he just laughed, gave me a high five, and was like, "Why didn't I ever think of that?" And I was like, "Hey, maybe next time I'll come along so we can make a few extra stops." P.S. He had been doing the "you have to give me a ride" thing without a license for a while now, and it was starting to get on everyone's nerves. And the next one is a beautiful petty revenge fence drama story. A previous home I owned had previously been rented and that tenant had thrown up a quick little chain link fence for his dog. Had the corners right at the corner of the house. Just a quick fix that got the job done. Basically, I don't have a dog, so fence or no fence did not matter to me. The day I moved in, my very young neighbor came over and asked, since she ran a daycare from her house, that was a whole other nightmare, that she would really like to put up a fence and to save money, could they just tie into mine and save the cost of fencing an entire side of the yard? No, I may be younger, but I'm not dumb. I knew that if they did that, they would be fencing in part of my property. And after a certain number of years with their maintenance of it, they would then own that property between our houses. Now, we are not talking a lot here. The houses were maybe 15 feet apart, but if they did that, they would own everything up to the edge of my house, even my air conditioner unit would be on their property. So then I told her this and said no, she cannot now or ever tie into the fence. Also mentioned that interaction with my realtor and she about threw a fit. Seems this person tried asking her the same thing and she told her the same thing too. Now if this was just a one-time thing trying her luck, it wouldn't be a big deal. But she kept asking off and on for a few years and I kept saying no. Even their husband came over to ask, maybe to intimidate a single woman. Still said no. I even did the research and got the actual property line map that showed exactly where our property lines were. One day, I saw a whole bunch of chain link fencing in their backyard, but not nearly enough to fence all the sides they needed to. They were going to try and tie in anyway, despite me repeatedly telling them no. So, that night, I took down, rolled up the fence, and dug up every single fence post. Now, the neighbor had to come out and watch the kids she was supposed to be watching because my fence was not there anymore. So the kids had more avenues to escape. Plus, it took them a bit longer to order more of the chain link fence and posts they suddenly needed. When I sold the house, I gave the new owner, a single man, a care package, which included the official property line map and a note to watch those neighbors like a hawk. My realtor, yep, the same one, I loved her so much I used her again, knew the entire story and gave him the rundown as well. And now, let's move on to the next story. It starts like this. There are a couple of ways I can format this story, but for it to make the most sense, I think I will tell you what the neighbor did first without our knowledge and then get into the meat of things. Now, this neighbor is really big on the HOA and thinks that he has some sort of authority to do anything he wants. Several times we have had to kick him off of our property and even out of our pool with him trying to claim it's public land because of the HOA, only for us to tell him that it is still our private property and of course that he is not welcome. We have even threatened to call the police on him for trespassing if he didn't quit. His next solution was something that I find to be disgusting. So we share a fence and it does a pretty good job of keeping his wandering eyes away from us. He ended up drilling a hole in the fence just large enough that he could sit down on his side and look through. We have bushes over there, so we would have never seen it, but he was getting a great view of us and the backyard. My wife and I are the kind of people that don't like being cooped up inside, but also like our private time. Our backyard is perfect for that, and we love our setup. We have some outdoor couches, a speaker to hook up music, a grill, and a nice pool. And as some couples do, we sometimes enjoy swimming naked with each other. It's one of the biggest benefits to having a private pool, in my opinion. Remember that at this point, we had no idea about the spy a-hole and assumed that we were alone. So instead, our neighbor was watching the entire time and from what I found out later was sitting there for a good while with us being totally naked. And yeah, there's a line between peeper and creep. And with the amount of time he was watching before doing anything else, I think that he crossed that line into creep. And by the way, guys, I think if you drill a hole into a wall or fence to watch your neighbor, I'm pretty sure that makes you a creep by default. Anyway, at some point during his free show, he came to the conclusion that he was offended by it and actually called the police on us. You can imagine the embarrassment as our backyard filled up with police and we had to get out of the pool and get towels around ourselves. About 5 cops in total and my wife was mortified. She wanted to just go into the house and never come out again. I was more curious about what they were doing in my backyard since we didn't call them. Me, can I help you officers? Officer, we got a call about public indecency. Apparently, you and your wife were exposing yourselves. Me? I mean, yes, we were obviously nude, but I assumed it was fine in our own backyard. We have tall fences and wouldn't have ever gone into the front like this. I mean, you can see how embarrassed we are right now. That was when the neighbor started running over and yelling towards the cops. Neighbor, excuse me. I called to report these heathens for exposing themselves to me. It was disgusting. And as an HOA board member, I can tell you right now that it is both illegal and against our bylaws. Officer, I'm sorry, sir. Hold on for one moment so we can make sure we got this right. So, this couple exposed themselves to you and then got into their pool. Neighbor, yes. Officer, what were they doing on your property? Neighbor, they weren't. They were right here. Upon asking how he knew about it was when it was revealed to everybody about his magic little hole in the fence. He should have been glad that cops were around because I might have beaten him up for spying on us and seeing my wife naked. I couldn't stop myself from yelling and the police needing to have us be away from each other in order to get everything straight. I was busy having my own little fit wanting him arrested for spying on us with the officer saying that they couldn't arrest him on the spot for that and I would have to file a separate report. For now, they had to finish with the indecent exposure issue. The neighbor was talking to another officer and coming up with his own reasoning of why it was considered that. For people that don't know, it's only illegal to be nude like that if you're in a public space or even around people that don't consent in a private space. Neither one of those rules were the case. So, we were not exposing ourselves to anybody. It was not our fault that he was staring at us through a peephole without us knowing. I managed to catch some of the conversation going on between the neighbor and an officer. Neighbor, but I saw them nude. That means they were exposing themselves to me. Officer, it's their private property. Unless you own this home and pool, they have every right to swim in it like that. You should not and cannot go looking at people through holes in a fence. Neighbor, this is an HOA neighborhood. That means there's no such thing as private property. It's all public and I had to watch them to see if they were following the bylaws. I have the right to do that. Officer, I don't know what rules it says in your bylaws, but I do know that our laws go above that and you are wrong in this case. If you want to file a lawsuit against them, I cannot stop you. But I can advise you that you will lose. In fact, if anybody has a case, it is them for invasion of privacy. The police eventually left and the neighbor was forced back on his side of the fence. I know the police told us we could sue him, but unless he was going to try first, we didn't want to bother getting a lawyer and all of that. He most likely would have ended up with a warning and getting free legal counsel from the HOA or something while we would have to pay out of pocket. He did warn us that he wasn't done with this and was taking it all the way to the HOA president. Then supposedly we would get sent to court and fined for exposing ourselves. That threat has yet to come and I have a feeling will never actually happen. He might not have a brain, but I'm sure at the very least the HOA lawyers do. What I did make sure was his hole was totally covered up. I added more bushes to really block him in case he tried to drill another hole into the fence. I also inspected regularly to see if he got any ideas again. So far, he seems to be quiet and probably got told off by the HOA president. Still, I don't think I will ever figure out his logic on the whole situation. You can type in the comments if you think that what we did was wrong and if you side with him. The police siding with us was enough and we will not stop enjoying ourselves on our private property because of one a-hole. And yeah, rip stars, I'm curious what you have to say about this. Do you think that OP was in the wrong or not? And the next one is a petty revenge story that is titled, Ice Cream Man Stiffed My Kid. So my kid ran outside to get ice cream from the ice cream man. My kiddo returned a little sad. I asked what was wrong and she said, I asked the ice cream man for my change and he gave me this lollipop and drove off before I could say anything. Well, suffice to say, my kid doesn't like lollipops and even if she did, it would not have been a fair trade. Not by a long shot. Anyway, I drove over to Costco and bought a few boxes of ice cream bars. And for the next few weeks, my kid shared ice cream with all of the kids on our side of the neighborhood. My kid made some new friends and no one on our side of the neighborhood bought from the ice cream man during that time. Side effect, when we ran out, Other parents started chipping in and provided snacks for the kids who played outside. And yeah, guys, thank you for watching. Please don't forget to like the video and I will see you again.